We are looking at what remains of what was called the first gravity hump classification yard. And I really don't know, but things have been quite moved and changed around down here. But there was once a very large railroad yard where railroad trains were made up, so to speak. It's where they got together to make a complete filled up manifest for their loads that they were sending out. We are looking south down the old southwest branch toward Youngwood. We are here looking at a bit of Hempfield Township that became Youngwood. Up here, out of sight, to the north is Greensburg. And this is where Youngwood developed. And you notice who was living here? Someone named Young, Mrs. Young. And this road going across here is what became Depot Street. Now this is about 10 years later. This is 1876. And there is a change here. You see, living here now is somebody named Woods, the Woods family. And the other big change, the really big change, is the fact that the railroad now, the Southwest Branch, is running through. That hadn't been there previously. It only started in 1873. And it's called here Youngwood Station, from the families that were been living there. There was no town there yet. There was a station and a road through there that would eventually become, maybe be realigned a little bit to become Depot Street. This is how it all developed. By 1939, this is an aerial view looking down. A town has grown up here. The amount of shipping has caused a lot of things to happen up here. The railroad needed a lot of cars and a lot of engines to bring out all the coal and coke from the coal and coke area down in Fayette County and from the local mines. This is the classification yard, and down here is the roundhouse where the engines were taken care of. I cleaned this up a little bit. This shows you the classification yard, which was perhaps the first gravity hump classification yard in the United States. There was also one at Altoona. There were many railroad tracks here, and the view from the air really doesn't show all the different tracks. This is where the cars were put and assembled to make the various trains. Down here was the engine house, or the roundhouse. This is where the engines were kept and serviced. We talked about a gravity hump classification yard. In one of these places, the engine would push a car up to a place where there was a more or less hump in the yard. Past that point, the car would be allowed to drift on its own, and it would go downhill, moved only by gravity, and slowed down at various places by retarders, which were more or less pincers right on the track that would slow down the car so it wouldn't do damage when it hit into the various the train that it was routed to by a number of switches that happened to be in the classification yard and controlled from a control tower. This is a view from the bridge looking down on the classification yard at Youngwood. This is about 1950 when Route 119 was being redone and made as we know it today. Over here on the side, you can just get a little bit of a view of the classification yard. I enlarged that to a degree. It's not a very good picture, but it's It's one of these situations where it's very much all you have. We don't have any really good photographs of the yard. Now, this is a December 1903 schematic diagram done by the Pennsylvania Railroad of the classification yard at Youngwood. This is Youngwood, right up here. This zero mark up here shows the main line at Greensburg, where the southwest branch going down through Youngwood started. And these are mile markers, 1 mile, 2 markers, 2 miles. Right at Huff, there's a small yard here, but it's not a classification yard. You get on through 3 miles, and at 4 miles down, the Youngwood classification yard is starting. And it was a rather complex arrangement of tracks, because you needed a lot of track space to keep the cars in reserve, and then to route them down over the hump down to where the trains were that they were getting put onto. Now, this is a very large classification yard over in Europe, in the Netherlands. I'm just putting this in here to show you how these things can sometimes be very complex. Back here would be the hump. A train or an engine would push a car to this point back here, and then they'd be allowed to move on their own just from the force of gravity to whichever string of cars that the switches would route them to. There would be a control tower that would move the switches to decide which train they were being put into. And I think that will be enough for this one. We should have another one on Youngwood. And so long for now. Bye.